a video run through of how to answer question 1 on the Tempest, the extract question. And give me 1 second. So I'm going to right. Okay, hopefully you see this in front of you. So I'm going to run through how I would possibly answer question 1, section A, the extract question on the Tempest. Right, so first thing I would do, it's always the same question, discuss the following passage from Act 3, Scene 3. I would explore what happens in Act 3 generally in comedies. There's always the potential threat of death in Act 3s. If it was tragedies, there'd be the potential, there would be an actual death that leads to the final tragedy. I would also explore what's previously just happened. Well, in Act 3, Scene 2, even though it's a slapstick comedy scene, we see that Caliban's urging on Trinculo and Stefano to go and kill Prospero. And this is kind of mirrored in this scene here with Antonio and Sebastian. So you might talk about how Shakespeare mirrors both subplot scenes with main scenes. So here the actions of Sebastian and Antonio mirror the actions of Caliban and Stefano and Trinculo in the previous scene. Maybe asking us to question who are the real noblemen and what does power do to people. Okay, so what do we notice first of all about this scene? It's on the island. First of all, everything's on the island, so there's unity of place. You might touch on that aspect of structure, how the play is structured with unity of place. The thing you notice most about this particular scene, I like to kind of look at sections of an extract. So I'd look at Antonio and Sebastian first of all, and I'd notice, first of all, these number of asides between them, showing their kind of intrigue, their conspiracy. It shows that asides show their intentions are to kill Prospero, and that's shared with the audience. So we've got that dramatic irony there that's going on. Now, in the previous scene, in Act 2, Scene 1, the person most assertive in wanting to usurp Alonso and Gonzalo was Antonio. And he says, come on, you've got to do it. If you do it, look how well my clothes sit on me. And Sebastian's a little more reticent. Sebastian's saying, yeah, but what about your conscience? Do you think about that? Antonio says, yeah, well, I don't care about conscience. If I had 1,000 or 100, whatever, he doesn't really care. But in this scene, we see that Antonio is, he's saying, now's the time to do it. Remember that you resolved to the effect to do it. Remember what you decided to do. And this time, Sebastian is quite assertive. We will take it thoroughly the next advantage we have. So perhaps they've moved on a little bit, and Sebastian is as eager to kill Prospero, to kill Alonso as Antonio is, perhaps showing us his changing character. Maybe if characters change, lose their identity, you might talk about how that's typical of comedy as well. What can we say about the language of the two plotters? It's quite assertive from Antonio. Do not forego the purpose that you resolve to effect. Okay, remember what you decided to do. You might talk about the latched verse between the two, again, showing their confederacy and how they're aligned together and how they're of one purpose. And the latched verse perhaps suggests that they are now in agreement. Antonio says, let's do it tonight, because they're going to be tired and they're not going to have such vigilance to do it. And Sebastian mirrors that. I say tonight, no more. Sebastian is equally wanting to kill these people. So we can see what power does to people. It kind of changes people. It turns people into murderers. And this is kind of mirrored in the previous scene, but for much more comic slapstick effect. Then let's move on to the use of stagecraft, the solemn and strange music. I would comment on that, and I would say something about the role of the music in the play, how music is used to bring characters together, such as Ferdinand and Miranda, how music is used to sort of bring the subplot characters from one part of the island to another. Also, how different characters relate to that music differently. In the previous scene, Act 3, Scene 2, we've had Caliban's view of the island. And he says the island is full of sweet airs. He says it's nothing that doesn't harm anybody. Okay. But we're always reminded that the music is rather like magic. It's a method by Ariel and Prospero to control and shape people. So you might talk about that. But here the music is solemn and strange, bizarre, foreshadowing something solemn and strange is about to happen. Alonso calls it harmony. Gonzalo calls it sweet music. I might talk about how people view the island tells us something about their moral worth. Gonzalo, we know, is good. Alonso is yet to repent, but he will do in the next scene, or by the end of this scene, he begins to repent. So you might discuss that. Now, back into the stage directions. Here, Prospero enters above. I might talk about that. Is he godlike, invisible, controlling all the action like a director of a play? Again, Prospero, by controlling this confederacy, is reassuring the audience that this is a comedy and it's not going to end out in as a tragedy because he's controlling everyone, just as he's controlled the weather and the illusion of the storm at the beginning, or rather, he's asked Ariel to do it. So we see various strange shapes enter. There's a banquet, and they dance about with gentle actions of salutation. Again, think about the play as a play. This is the opportunity to get the band out, to get open up the costume cupboard and get all the actors dancing in some strange way. So it's a kind of visual feast or banquet as well for the audience. So try to remember how the play works as a visual and audio sort of spectacular as well. People are asked or invited to come and eat. The offer of comfort given to strangers. Maybe from a post-colonial point of view, we might think about Thanksgiving and the native population offering food to the new colonizers. Or from a Christian point of view, it might remind us of the Last Supper, this idea of a banquet with Jesus, who tells his disciples that one of you will betray me. So maybe we're reminded of that in this scene with Sebastian and Antonio. You don't have to concentrate too much on different interpretations for this scene, but you can kind of highlight how things can be seen or understood in the extract. One of the things you might notice is the kind of constant references to religious language. So for instance, Alonso says, good, kind keepers, heavens, and we get other references to religion later on in the extract, such as honest Lord and worse than devils. I'll get onto that later, but look for patterns in the language. It's sometimes useful to do that. Right. So Alonso and Sebastian together, they're asking themselves, what are these things? What are these things? What is this? What are these? Again, this reminds me perhaps of how Caliban is viewed by Stefano. What is this thing? Is he a moon calf, a thing? Prospero talks about Caliban as mere earth or tortoise. So again, the otherworldly nature of characters reminds me of how Caliban is viewed as well. So what I'm doing by looking at the extract is I'm looking at how it reminds me of other things outside of the extract as well. And so I'm proving my knowledge of the play to the examiner. So for instance, what are these things? Are they of this earth? What are they? Reminds me also of how Ferdinand and Miranda viewed each other when they first set eyes on each other. Is she an angel? Is he of earthly form? Again, they're kind of they see each other as otherworldly, but in a beautiful way. Whereas Caliban is seen as kind of otherworldly in a kind of beastly way. Right. Sebastian's reaction is he can't believe what he's seeing in front of him. He says, well, now I've seen this, I will believe unicorns exist, and I believe phoenixes will exist. So that, again, that sense of mythical creatures. He says, I've seen it all now. I might as well believe in unicorns and phoenixes. Okay, so again, this idea of finding connections in the extract with elsewhere in the play, the idea of seeing something otherworldly is can remind us of Ferdinand and Miranda, can remind us of how Caliban is viewed as well. Let's turn over the page. What's Antonio's ideas? Antonio says, well, I can't believe I've seen this. I'll be sworn 'tis true, and travellers never did lie, though fools at home condemn them. He says, I'll believe any travellers now when they tell us tall tales of going to other worlds. I'll believe what they say rather than thinking they're liars. Maybe this reflects the audience's interest in this new world, of discovering the new world. And the ideas of Strachey and his voyage to the new world. Maybe disinterest in foreign lands and undiscovered new worlds is kind of something that's reflected in Antonio's reaction here. I'm also reminded of what Gonzalo says. If I should report what I've seen, these kind of spirits in this banquet, if in Naples I should report this, what would they say? This kind of reminds me of how other characters view Caliban, and they said, what would I, Stefano says, what would I have if I took Caliban to London? What would they say? So this idea of how people back home would view these spectacular or strange things is something that's constantly referenced. And so that allows you to talk about things in the extract by relation to things outside of the extract. Okay, now Gonzalo goes on to say something quite interesting. He calls them these islanders. And I suppose it raises the question of who are the true islanders? Who are the true indigenous people of this island? Is it the spirits? Is it Ariel? And perhaps it is Ariel more than Caliban, because Caliban comes to the island with his mother. So again, the idea of who are the true natives of the island is referenced here. And he calls them, of course, they're of monstrous shape, reminding us again of Caliban and how he's seen as monstrous, but their manners are more gentle, kind than our human generation. So it's interesting that, again, this idea, this theme that Shakespeare seems to come up with in this play is about who is most human. And we see that in Act 4 and Act 5, when Prospero is reminded of having virtue rather than vengeance, and he's reminded by Ariel, and he remembers that Ariel is perhaps more humane than him. Maybe we're asked to think about the noble savage Caliban in his verse, his appreciation of the island and the music of the island. We're asked to question, is Caliban perhaps more human than the humans, even though he's condemned as monstrous? So I'm looking at this kind of extract here of they are of monstrous shape, these spirits, but yet they're gentle and kind and more human than us. Okay, so maybe you might think about, well, what's Shakespeare's intentions in this? Bring it back to this theme of questioning who is most human. So at the end of this, remember, Prospero is above observing all of this. He acknowledges the honesty of Gonzalo, and he finishes by saying, well, some of you are not so honest. Some of you are devils. And that suggests that devils will have to be punished. And they get punished in the remainder of this scene in Act 3, Scene 3, when we see the harpy come in to deliver divine punishment. So again, this idea that Prospero is controlling all events, Prospero is all-seeing and godlike, and questioning who is good and who is evil. And this is a theme that runs through all the play. Here, Prospero can be seen almost like God, like seeing sins of man. But again, we have to remember that Prospero is also a sinner as well, so it becomes much more complicated. But nonetheless, dramatic irony is established. The audience know that Prospero is fairly safe because he's seeing the conspiracy in front of him, even though the conspirators don't see him. So that dramatic irony is at work here. So that brings us to the end of this run through. What have we kind of looked at? We start broadly Where in the play does it come? It comes in Act 3. Well, Act 3 always has a kind of sense of mini climax. The potential for death is always there in tragedy, but it doesn't actually occur. We consider what has happened previously. So we might look at how the extract scene that you're asked to examine mirrors or contrasts with the scene that just comes before it. It's worth just considering where in the play it comes. We've looked at how characters talk and behave. And so we've looked at asides. So could you give me a couple of minutes? I'm just recording. Thanks. We've looked at asides, which show the conspiracy. Their latch verse shows their conspiracy. But we've also looked at the role of Prospero, how he is a director of events here. Okay, it's very important that if you get any stage directions, you consider the use of stagecraft, the role of music to create drama and spectacle, the role of proxemics, the use of Prospero above, the use of asides, a convention of comedies, and the use of dance, again, to give some kind of variation for the audience, to enjoy something new and different. We've touched on how Prospero, through dramatic irony, through staging, ensures that this play remains a comedy rather than a tragedy. So we're always in safe hands. We know he's not going to die. And I hope I've kind of spoken about how you should look in the extract and see if you can see any patterns and how it relates perhaps to things outside of the extract. So we've talked about how the end of the extract ends. Prospero is commenting on devils. And so we know that devils must receive some divine punishment. So we've got the contradiction at the end between honest Lord and devils, this kind of opposites, this use of good and evil. But we've also got that religious language that seems to run through the play, lords, devils, heavens, reminding us perhaps that there is a kind of Christian reading of this play, and it runs through the whole play. For instance, at the end of the play, when Caliban says, I shall seek for grace. Okay, we're constantly looking for these kind of patterns of language. So the extract reinforces its form of comedy through the use of parallels and opposites and asides. And we're forced to consider what, at the end of the extract, what is it that power makes people do? Power makes people become tyrants. Prospero is violent against Caliban. The lust for power makes people like Antonio and Sebastian turn into murderers. Equally, the idea of grasping power turns Stefano into a potential murderer as well, and Trinculo. And the desire for revenge, being the victim of powerful tyranny, also makes Caliban into someone who wants to kill. So we're reminded of the idea of sin and punishment in this scene. So I hope this helps. Good luck with your revision. That ends this run through.